No matter where you live, whether it's a town or in the country, chances are you don't live too far from a churchyard or a cemetery. Have you ever just wandered around and read some of the headstones and wondered what kind of life these people had, or wondered how they died? If you look closely, you may find one that has a curious epitaph written upon it, or a couple of words that may seem curious and hint to something intriguing. In this series, I'll be bringing you stories behind these headstones to reveal an interesting life or a tragic and sorrowful end. These are not celebrities as we know today. Some may have been recognised in their lifetime but are forgotten names now, or they may be normal folk whose lives were tragically cut short. Join me as I discover some tales from the grave. Welcome back. In this video there is no grave to visit or no memorial plaque to read. Scattered somewhere in the Garden of Remembrance at Lodge Hill Cemetery in Birmingham are the ashes of an actress who was prolific both on stage and screen and was a household name in the UK and in America. But in 1954, at the age of 64, she passed away at the Hollymore Psychiatric and Geriatric Hospital in Northfield, Birmingham. She was best known for playing character roles in dramatic films, crime films, adventure films of the silent film era. She was born one of 4 children as Eva Eliza Hulston in Christchurch, New Zealand, to Albert Charles Hulston and his wife Eliza Ann Freeman Hulston on May 3, 1890. She was educated locally at a convent and later pursued an acting career. She came to England on a visit with her parents and stayed, without their permission. She was primarily a stage actress, appearing in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada and other countries, before eventually making the transition to film. She made her actual film debut playing the role of Kitty the Moth in the film The Mystery of the Diamond Belt in 1914. The film, which was directed by Charles Raymond and written for the screen by Harry Blythe, also starred Philip Kay, Lewis Carlton, Harry Graham, Austin Camp, Percy Moran and Douglas Payne, and it tells the story of a crook who poses as a lord to rob a merchant and holds a detective captive in his cellar. Besides playing the role of Kitty the Moth in the film The Mystery of the Diamond Belt in 1914 and playing the role of Cynthia Ells in the film drama Cynthia of the Wilderness in 1917, her many other films include 5 Nights, The Woman Who Did, Royal Love, Jack Tar, Burnt Wings, Eve's Daughter, All the World's a Stage, Russia, Land of Tomorrow, The Scarlet Wooing, The Black Sheep and The Woman of the Iron Bracelets. Her last film role was playing the Woman in Black in the 1920 adventure film Fantomas. Besides acting in films, she also appeared on the stage in Beethoven in 1910 at His Majesty's Theatre London, and in Macbeth 1912 at His Majesty's Theatre, and on Broadway in New York City, and in several stage productions of such plays as Mrs. Forsyte in Love for Love 1925 and as Clarice Van Doren in The Half-Naked Truth in 1926. During her acting career, she also used the name Ava Balfour. She continued to act and entertain until her retirement. Besides acting, she was also a talented artist and participated in women's suffrage activities, notably at the Suffragette Bazaar, which was held at Caxton Hall, London in April of 1909. She passed away at Hollymore Psychiatric and Geriatric Hospital in Northfield, England on March 19, 1955 at the age of 64. She was married twice, first to the artist James Lawson Balfour at the Registrar General's office in Christchurch, New Zealand on April 29, 1904, but were later apparently divorced sometime before 1911, and secondly to the stage actor Arthur Stanley Howlett, whom she sometimes worked with at St Paul's Covent Garden Church in Covent Garden, London on August 26, 1918, and they were together until her death. The couple had one child together, a daughter named Yvette Pantia Howlett, who was born in 1913. This article from the Christchurch Sun, dated 26th of March 1914, gives us an insight into Eve's early career. Miss Eve Balfour, a charming New Zealand actress. Miss Eve Balfour, who is now appearing at the Royalty in C.B. Fernald's popular comedy The Pursuit of Pamela, is one of several young Australians who promise to make their mark on the London stage, says the British Australasian of February the 12th. Born near Christchurch, New Zealand, and educated at St Mary's Convent in that picturesque town, Miss Balfour, while still in her teens, displayed remarkable histrionic ability and derived keen delight from taking part in various Shakespearean plays produced by the pupils. Her secret ambition for a stage career was unconsciously stimulated by the teachers, who were impressed by the evidence of her talent. But Miss Balfour's cherished desire was not gratified until she came to London about 5 years ago, when, without any experience of the stage, she so impressed Sir Herbert Tree that he engaged her to understudy one of the principal roles in False Gods. Following this appearance, she played lead at the Little Theatre with Miss Gertrude Kingston in McAvoy's and won gratifying encomiums from the critics. A still more important event in her career occurred in 1911 when she was entrusted with the role of Hecate in Macbeth, which Sir Herbert Tree staged at His Majesty's. It was no slight distinction for the young actress to appear with such brilliant stars as Sir Herbert himself, Mr. Arthur Bourchier, and last but no means least, Miss Violet Vanbrugh. Miss Balfour really created a new Hecate, and her impersonation of the Queen of the Witches is still remembered as one of the features of the revival. Until recently, Miss Balfour was playing Delia in Stanley Horton's one-act play Fancy Free, but in the character of Nurse Tracy in The Pursuit of Pamela, she has a part which she has invested with, her own striking individuality. There is, however, no doubt that Miss Balfour is destined for greater things. Gifted with a charming and graceful personality, extremely artistic, her keen sympathies embracing music, painting and literature as well as the drama, and inspired by an intense enthusiasm in her art, she only awaits her opportunity to secure that recognition of her talent which it is due. As we have seen, Eve Balfour was a prolific actress. Let's look at her films a bit closer. The Woman Who Did is a 1915 British silent drama film directed by Walter West, starring Eve Balfour, Thomas H. MacDonald and George Foley. It was adapted from the 1895 novel The Woman Who Did by Grant Allen. It follows the life of Herminia Barton, a Cambridge-educated woman as she tries to make it in the world by herself. The BFI describes it as a romance set in Italy involving a suffragette who protests against marriage by openly living with a lover. Jack Tar was released in April 1915. It is a British silent war film directed by Bert Haldane and starring Jack Tessier, Eve Balfour and Thomas H. MacDonald. An admiral's daughter named Margarita, played by Balfour, goes undercover in Turkey to help a British agent thwart a German plot during the First World War. 5 Nights by Victoria Cross is a captivating story set in Alaska, following the journey of artist Trevor Lonsdale as he seeks inspiration amidst the beauty and challenges of the Alaskan wilderness. Through his encounters with the majestic Muir Glacier, the local culture and a young Chinese woman named Susie, Trevor explores themes of solitude, artistic passion and human connections. The novel weaves a tale of self-discovery, love and the intricate balance between nature's allure and its unforgiving nature, painting a vivid portrait of Trevor's experiences in the land of the midnight sun. In the summer of 1915, when a new film outraged half of Britain, it was people in Preston it outraged first of all. And though the film might have been silent, those people certainly were not. The film was 5 Nights, and it was full of shenanigans. It was based on a novel by the popular writer Victoria Cross, who was said to have chosen her pen name to annoy the late Queen Victoria. The novel and the film told the story of a rich young artist who sails to Alaska before coming back to his fashionable London studio. The artist is shown wooing a Chinese woman, falling in love with his own cousin, getting her to pose for a picture he is painting, and shooting a man stone dead. Controversially, he is also shown as the father of an illegitimate child. The woman was played by a young actress named Sybil Debray, who wasn't Chinese at all. Although this was only her second film, she had already enjoyed considerable success on the West End stage. The Tatler had called her a bewitching little actress whose daintiness and personal charm ensure for a big reception. Sybil's performance would be seen in Preston before it was seen anywhere else. That was on August the 30th, 1915, when Five Nights was shown at the old King's Palace Theatre. The King's Palace was full to the brim that Monday afternoon, with Edward Bennet among the several hundred people in the audience, and he didn't like what he saw. "I am not an angel," young Edward said, "but the film was disgusting to me." He was the projectionist at a rival cinema and maybe had his own axe to grind. But what he said was also said by other Preston folk. Margaret Buck lived in Spring Gardens, which was close to the King's Palace. She took great exception to the shenanigans, calling Five Nights a very indecent and disgraceful picture. Margaret worked in a cotton mill and claimed to visit picture houses 4 or 5 times a week. "I have 7 children and am not easily shocked and like a bit of fun," she said. "But if I had known the sort of picture it was, I would not have gone to see it on my own account, for I did not enjoy it, but was absolutely disgusted with it." Taking his own place in the plush seats was the town's chief constable, James Kerr Watson. He had only recently come into the post, having beaten 50 other men who had much greater experience than he. A Welshman with Scottish parents, he was barely 40 years old at the time, and he had only recently been appointed to the post. He had come to Preston from Peterborough, where he had earned a reputation as a strict disciplinarian, and what he saw in the King's Palace that hot afternoon left him singularly unimpressed. After the house lights had come up again, Mr. Watson told a reporter that Five Nights was objectionable and offensive, and he implied that if the film was ever shown again, the theatre's licence would be taken away. There were still more Preston folk who felt the same way. Frederick Daggers lived on Bedford Street, which ran off Adelphi Street close to the town centre. Like Mrs. Buck, he had 7 children, and he had seen Five Nights while convalescing. A soldier in the Loyal North Lancashire Regiment, Frederick had served on the Western Front before receiving a shrapnel injury to his chest. Now he called the film objectionable, suggestive and indecent. The reaction to Five Nights was similar elsewhere. In Wallasey, no less a personage than the mayor called it an extremely immoral and suggestive picture. "I would not have liked to have taken my wife or daughter to see such a thing," he went on, "and if any female had been in the theatre, I would have walked out." The film was banned there and banned in Southport, St Helens and Runcorn as well, and it was also banned in Accrington, Bradford, Coventry and Dublin. Faced with Chief Constable Watson's words, the management of the King's Palace decided to act cautiously. After Five Nights had been shown there only once, the film was wound back onto its spool, put back in its can and sent on its way. In the weeks that followed, it would be shown in Eccles, Miles Platting and Ashton-under-Lyne without anyone there batting an eyelid. There were, in fact, many places where the film was shown. They included not just Manchester and Salford, but Liverpool and Blackpool, Hull, Newcastle and Edinburgh as well. And in Cardiff, Five Nights was praised by a local newspaper. "Its wonderful scenes have never been equalled in the history of cinematography," the newspaper wrote. "In spite of all that has been said to the contrary, it is not marred by any objectionable scenes." It was when Walter Stott and Fred White found out what James Watson had said that the trouble really began. They were Manchester businessmen whose headquarters lay in the shadow of Victoria Station, and they had been the men distributing Five Nights around the northwest of England. As they would later explain, they had paid a small fortune for that privilege. Within days of the Preston showing, Walter and Fred issued a writ against Mr. Watson. They said that by calling their film objectionable and offensive, he had defamed them and damaged their business. And they claimed damages of as much as £5,000, a sum worth more than 60 times as much today. The case would be heard in Manchester in February 1916, towards the end of a cold, wet winter, as German Zeppelins extended their terrifying raids across more and more of the country. The venue for the trial was the Great Assizes Court in Strangeways, right next to the prison. It was the largest building in the city at the time. The proceedings lasted for 2 days, and on the evening of the first day, the gentlemen of the jury, and they were all gentlemen, were taken to see a special showing of 5 Nights in a little cinema across the road. In his defence, Chief Constable Watson claimed that what he had said was nothing more than fair comment, and for its part the jury agreed. Late on the second afternoon of the trial, after deliberations that had lasted barely an hour, the foreman rose to his feet and announced that Walter and Fred's claim was dismissed. Back in Preston, everyone had moved on from 5 Nights by then. They had in fact begun moving on as soon as the film was sent on its way. James Kerr Watson remained in the Chief Constable of Preston until his retirement in 1937. And though 5 Nights was only Sybil de Bray's second film, it would also be her last. Little trace of 5 Nights now remains, save for a few documents in the Lancashire archives on Bow Lane in Preston, together with 2 tantalising frames of the film itself. Burnt Wings is a 1916 British silent drama directed by Walter West and starring Eve Balfour as Margaret Dennis, Joseph Tozer and Thomas H. MacDonald. It was adapted from the 1909 novel Burnt Wings by Mrs. Stanley Wrench. A woman decides to bring up a baby that her husband has had with his mistress. Cynthia in the Wilderness is a 1916 British silent drama film directed by Harold Weston and starring Eve Balfour as Cynthia Ells, Ben Webster and Milton Rosmer. It was based on a novel of the same name by Hubert Wales. Cynthia in the Wilderness is a novel written by Hubert Wales and first published in 1908. The book tells the story of Cynthia, a young girl who is sent to live with her aunt and uncle in the Canadian wilderness. Cynthia is initially unhappy with her new surroundings and struggles to adapt to the harsh living conditions. However, she soon becomes fascinated by the natural beauty of the wilderness and begins to explore the surrounding forests and lakes. Along the way, Cynthia encounters a variety of wildlife and learns important lessons about survival and self-reliance. As she grows more accustomed to her new home, Cynthia also forms close bonds with her aunt and uncle, as well as with the other settlers in the area. The novel is a coming-of-age story that celebrates the beauty and resilience of nature and explores themes of family, community and personal growth. In 1916, Eve Balfour starred in a film titled Eve's Daughter, written by Rathmel Wilson. I found a few advertisements for another film from 1916 starring Balfour called Love, and this was apparently from another novel by Wilson titled When a Woman Loves, but I can find no information on that film. Interestingly, on one of the adverts for that film, it mentions another film that Balfour was producing, The Life of Lady Hamilton. Miss Balfour further announces that she is now in the course of producing The Life of Lady Hamilton, in which she will portray the part of Emma, Lady Hamilton. The scenario has been prepared by Mr. Roland Talbot, who was responsible for the scenario of Love. At the bottom of this advert, from the Bioscope dated 6 January 1916, it reads, "For further particulars, apply the Eve Balfour Film Company, care of the Neptune Studios, Elstree." The Woman of the Iron Bracelets is a 1920 British silent crime film directed by Sidney Morgan and starring Eve Balfour as Nora Burwell, George Keane and Marguerite Blanche. A fleeing young woman facing a murder charge goes to the assistance of a young man who is being cheated out of his inheritance by his stepfather by proving the stepfather is a professional hypnotist. The iron bracelets of the title refer to her handcuffs. The Scarlet Wooing is a 1920 British silent drama film directed by Sidney Morgan and starring Eve Balfour as Mrs. Rayburn and Marguerite Blanche. The screenplay concerns an author who writes a scandalous novel to raise funds for his daughter's operation. It was released in April 1920, and this article from Kinematograph Weekly, dated 25th of March 1920, goes into more detail about Eve Balfour. The Scarlet Wooing is the latest progress film to emanate from the Shoreham-on-Sea studios. We are promised a few surprises, and it will come as a surprise to find Eve Balfour, whose rise to fame was mainly by the aid of vampire roles, in a sweet domestic part. Miss Balfour, who is at present working in America, was hailed in New York as the Queen of British Vampires. But this is not the only surprise, for who would expect to find Marguerite Blanche appearing as the bad girl of the family? Her previous association with screen art has revealed her as a most delightful heroine. Arthur Walcott is the bold bad man who, in contradiction to most film stories, does not meet with the fate which overtakes the villain. The Black Sheep was released in March 1920. A vamp tries to lure a penniless heir away from a financier's daughter, and Eve Balfour played a character named Laurie Fenton. Her last film was called Fantomas, in which she played a character called the Woman in Black. The film tells the story of Fantomas, a master criminal who offers to give up his life of crime if the authorities promise not to prosecute him for his past crimes. He is enraged when they refuse his ultimatum and determines to terrorise the city into submitting to his demands. The film with Eve Balfour in the cast is now considered lost. In 1926, a portrait of Eve Balfour appeared in an exhibition by the artist Augustus John, and this article from the Daily Express describes them as cruel studies of women. Augustus John's new exhibition, which opens at the Chenille Galleries in Chelsea, contains a series of relentless portrait studies of modern women. The types range from the grace of Princess Bibesco and the rather flamboyant elegance of the lady with the violin, to the primitive dark-skinned gitanus and a semi-nude coloured girl in a lilac undergarment. Between these extremes are Chelsea types, Nellie and a dark-eyed woman, both with bobbed hair, Chiquita, who is seen at all the best Chelsea parties, the little Kalmuck with enormous pathetic eyes and upturned lashes, and Eve Balfour wearing a white mantilla. Here and there, as in the portrait of Princess Bibesco and in the fine head of the artist's son Romilly, we see John in sympathy with his sitter, but in most cases he gives his victim no quarter. He looks for the unusual, finds it and sets it down, if not in malice, at any rate with cruel emphasis. The power of these portraits is undeniable. Once seen, they can never be forgotten. In an article dated the 26th of January 1928, the Bioscope paper ran an article, News from the Outposts. Eve Balfour, formerly well known on the screen in England, is in Hollywood. It is understood she is now writing scenarios. Also, an article in the Bystander dated the 5th of September 1928 reads, Miss Eve Balfour, the British actress who was educated in a New Zealand convent, is now in England, where she is to appear in British films after a long career in America. This is the last article I found regarding Eve Balfour. She appears on the 1939 register as Eve Howlett, age 49, with her husband Stanley. He is listed as actor and she is listed as artist. After that, she gets a brief mention in her husband's obituary, printed in the Stratford-upon-Avon Herald on the 6th of March 1959. Hollymore Hospital was a psychiatric hospital located at Tessal Lane, Northfield in Birmingham, England, and is famous primarily for the work on group psychotherapy that took place there in the years of the Second World War. It closed in 1994. The hospital was built as an annex to Rubery Lunatic Asylum by Birmingham Corporation and opened the 6th of May 1905. By 1949, Hollymore Hospital was recognisably distinct from Rubery Hill Hospital. It held 590 patients, falling slowly to 490 by 1984 and then dropping rapidly to 139 by 1994. After the introduction of care in the community in the early 1980s, the hospital went into a period of decline and closed in July 1994, and it was subsequently largely demolished. I found Eve's death certificate, and it states the cause of death as coronary thrombosis brought on by arteriosclerosis, which translated means a blood clot in the heart causing cardiac arrest brought on by thickening and hardening of the arteries. This can be caused by a poor diet. Her address at the time of the death wasn't the Hollymore Hospital, but a house on Tessal Lane in Northfield, Birmingham. Why biographies mention her dying at the hospital is unclear. She may have been a patient, but I think for her heart problems rather than mental or psychological issues. Why Eve Balfour ended up in Birmingham, I don't know. Her husband was a stage actor, so maybe they chose to be near Stratford-upon-Avon. It's such a shame there isn't more on Eve's later life, and a shame that she has no marker at the crematorium.